if anyone from NPR is listening, Maggie, you can't have her, okay? She's on our podcast.
Look.
Don't go poaching our talent.
If you want to pay me.
Are you kidding? Do you think they could possibly outbid us on NPR?
A little bit.
All right.
Just a little.
Let's kick this page.
Hello, and welcome to Plain Truth, a Holy Spirited podcast. I'm Maggie Ulmer, and I am here today with a guest and, of course, with the regulars.
David Watson.
Sky Kisker.
Rudy Rasmus.
Rudy Rasmus. Thanks for being with us today.
Yeah,
It's good to be
thanks
here.
for being on the show.
It really
We're really
is.
honored to have you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
First of all, thank y'all for letting me hang out with you today. It's really good to be here.
I want you to tell a little bit about your own story, too. Just, most of our listenership is United Methodist, and a lot of those people will recognize your name, but there are some folks who won't be in that our little Methodist bubble.
Yeah.
So, talk about... I'm sitting here with your book, which I just found out is a special book because this is part of the one. This is one of the ones. So I got this. I don't know what year it was, but I was.
It's 10 years ago, man.
At least,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, because I was. This was back when I lived in Maryland, and Vance Ross was my pastor,
Mm-hmm.
and so I got this book back then, and read it, and with my our Sunday school group read it together. So it just told a bit about your story.
That's right.
Right about who.
The book is called Touch.
The book is called Touch by Rudy Rasmus, and I have one of these self-published copies, which I didn't know
Very special.
until today when I got to sign it. Yeah, this isn't one of those this was out of the back of Rudy's car.
That's right. Sold 10,000 of those off of card tables.
Yeah.
And then I sold it. I sold the next version of that to Thomas Nelson.
Yeah.
Oh, that'll work.
But I can't tell you how glad I am to have this version.
That's a good
With your
version.
signature
I've got
too.
the other version.
But anyway, this tells a little about your story, about your redemption story.
My redemption story, yeah.
And so I would like to hear your redemption story, or I obviously read the book, but I'd like to hear you tell it in your own voice, and then just talk about what happened. How did you get into ministry? You're a licensed local pastor.
Yeah, I'm still a licensed local pastor.
I used to oversee course of study in the Northeast, which I can't tell you how much encouragement you gave to so many people.
Yeah.
And I love telling that story. But in any case, talk about, what's this church, who is it, and what happened there,
Yeah, well, for those of you listening who haven't met me before, I'm an old hippie. And I think that kind of frames the context by which I do ministry today. As a matter of fact, most of the hipsters that I hang out with, which are many these days, actually have given me credit for creating the movement. But,
well, you do have the beard.
I got the beard and the extreme alt left thing that accompanies it. But so I grow up really contrarian to everything normal. And it emerged out of a very chaotic home. My parents were good people, but they were unresolved. And as a result, as an only child with extreme discernment capability, I saw early that I was going to have to be in charge. So as far back as I can remember, I was in charge, which meant every day I determined what my day was going to be like. Otherwise, it didn't get determined. And along the way, I got a chance to pick the people who I was going to trust my soul with, or my life with, in that same given day. So, my spiritual formation really began at the feet of my auntie Maymay, who owned the neighborhood grocery store, who really had a missiology that framed how I see missiology today. She, in her grocery store, she gave everyone who didn't have money food. And if you did have money, she treated you just like she treated the person who didn't have money, which meant it was always a level playing field in her grocery store. The drunkest person, the most aggressive person, was treated with the same kindness as the person who was dressed up. So in that little grocery store, I saw what I called the most effective church at work. I had I had a view of it even before I really knew what church was.
And was your Indy mate? Was she a woman of faith, or was she just a good? Oh, she was.
Yeah. She was a Christian. As a matter of fact, I would go to her mission circle meetings with her, and those were basically meetings where a group of older black women would get in a circle, and they'd talk about their lives, and then they'd sing some songs. And I always felt really safe among those people. I really did. But I never felt the same thing in the church. I would always feel it in those small circles, but I didn't feel that same thing in the church. And it dawned on me, the one reason I didn't feel it in the church was almost always because of the preacher. My dad taught me to never trust preachers and church people.
Why's that?
He said they were full of something.
Well, can't argue with that.
And subsequently, I formed an opinion of church leadership that really just stuck with.
Doesn't the Holy Spirit?
The Lord is funny. So funny.
As a matter of fact, when I got along the way, I'm on this journey, and in college, I had a good friend, dear friend named Leslie White, and Leslie White was a Vietnam era veteran who had returned from Vietnam back to the University of North Texas to continue college. This was the 70s. Leslie was Buddhist. First black Buddhist I'd ever met.
He might be one of 6 in the world, but yeah, go ahead.
So Leslie introduced me to Buddhism, and I really liked it. So I started practicing Buddhism with Leslie. I did that until I finished college. I finished college, and I kind of got out into the work world, and discovered that that this Buddhism was cool, but it didn't give my anger anywhere to go. I mean, it didn't give a place for my anger. I really had anger. So I had a buddy who had been studying African ancestral religions and had sort of encountered the Nation of Islam. In those days, Minister Louis Farrakhan was running the nation. And the nation gave my anger a place to go. So I started studying the Islamic tradition with the nation. And ultimately discovered this feels a lot like the Black Baptist Church I left, and ultimately just kind of left religion. That was the late 70s. 79, 80, I moved from Dallas to Houston, and I was really in a dark place. And I've been in several dark places in my life, and I'll talk about my most recent one before we finish today.
Yeah.
But that one was that place was complete disillusionment with the world. I was completely disillusioned and relatively hopeless. Didn't feel any real energy for life in that place. So what I did every day for about 2 years, from 80 to 82, so I went to the library every day. And I just hung out in the library. There was a lot of homeless folk around the library. But it was always really a cool place. So I researched business ideas. I read stuff. But that's what I did every day for about 2 years. At the time, I was 22 years old. I didn't mention it, but I finished high school when I was 16, and 3 years later, I finished college. With a bachelor's in business. And so intellect was never a problem. The challenge for me was always seeing a lot of what other people didn't see. So it was always a burden for me. So I'm researching, I'm hanging out, I'm just kind of doing me, and then I just kind of started some businesses with my father. One particular business I started with him was a motel, and it was a dream of his to build this motel. As a matter of fact, he gave me the blueprints to that motel when I was 5 years old, and really told me that this particular motel business was strictly we were going to build it for the sex trade. And then he would explain to me at 5 years old how we were going to make money. And he said basically we were going to make money off of other people's pain. Now, this is my orientation.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's whack.
Yeah. That's a little whack.
Yeah. So in the midst of
that'll give you a different perspective on the world. I see why you had to say, like, I've got to make at 5 even.
Yeah.
I had
to take charge.
I got to take charge.
So relatively misogynistic in my upbringing. Very cynical. And I'm hanging out in the library while building this motel. So at 22, 23, we started construction on it. 24, opened it. And for the next 12 years, I run a sexually oriented business that's probably of the darkest variety. It was pretty terrible. But it was kind of a walk in the park for me, because I've been a ringleader, my whole life. When I was a kid, I'm leading the ring. So I'm running this business, and this is my conversion moment. I'm running this business, and I go to a funeral, a cousin's funeral. And at that funeral, I see a woman who has the brightest light that I've ever seen in a human being. Just the brightest light. The light was coming from the inside out. Now, for a guy who's spent most of his time in darkness, the light is very visible. So I make way to meet this woman. I asked my mother, who was at this same funeral, do you know who she is? She said, that's Silver's niece. So I said, well, can you point me to Silver? So I went and met Silver, who introduced me to Florence, who was this woman's mother, who introduced me to this woman, her daughter, and her name was Juanita. I met her. She at the time was in insurance sales, and over the next several minutes, I am attempting to get a date, and she was working on an appointment. So she got the appointment, I got the date. We got together.
Do you have good insurance?
I got good insurance. That policy, I bought that policy. So we start dating, and the voice. This is the moment. So as a little kid, I always had this voice that would literally, for those listening, don't get scared, all right? But this voice would tell me what was right, what was wrong, who to trust, who not to trust. So this voice told me in the clearest words, don't do anything to this woman that would ever cause her to not trust me. Completely impossible for me at that point in my life. So we dated for about a month or two, but that particular evening, I knew that I could no longer see her, because if I did, I was going to harm her. And so one evening I walked away, never saw her again. Never expected to see her again. She never called the next day. I didn't call her. I didn't know that she had formed an opinion of me of a chauvinist. I didn't know that, but she had. And she was perfectly fine with me not calling her again. A year passed, and I still never expected to see her again. But at the end of this year, the voice returns and says, "Call Juanita." I called her. I asked her, was she available for lunch? She was. Several months later, we were married. What I didn't tell you was I made a decision when I was 9 years old, a fidelity decision. Because of my father's serial adultery and having to ride with him while he visited his other partners, I made the decision as a kid that if I ever got married, I would not cheat on my wife. So now at 28 years old, I'm married. Non-believing, but church attending, because I promised Juanita I would attend church with her. So we started going to a Methodist church in Houston, Windsor Village United Methodist. And this preacher at this church, immediately I told this preacher what I did for a living. Basically, I told him I ran a whorehouse. I said, now this will for sure convince this guy to not look at me again.
You're trying to get him to reject you, basically.
Yeah. I'm thinking, this is it. He's a preacher. Not only did he pursue friendship, but one Sunday, out of nowhere, and at the time Windsor Village was a church of about 400 people, one Sunday he eased up on the side of the pew where I was sitting and handed me a hymnal. And asked me to read the liturgy that day. So I did. And as I started reading, something started happening to me. So I get back to the motel, and the guys that work with me are guys that I grew up with. They know me really well. They were really loyal. So Danny was one particular guy, and so I got out of the car from that Sunday. We would go to church, but we lived, Juanita and I at this point lived at the motel. Danny looked at me and said, "What happened to you today?" I said, "What do you mean, what happened to me today?" "Nothing happened to me today." Fine. He said, "No, man, something happened to you today." Now, I knew something had happened to me.
Yeah, he's right.
But I had no idea that you could see it. So I just kind of kept on with my life. A month or so later, Kirby John calls a group of guys together to lead these Bible studies for men.
Kirby John is your pastor?
My pastor at the time.
Yeah.
And I signed up for one. That's crazy. And I signed up for a Bible study with a guy named Willie Lane. And I ended up meeting Willie every Tuesday night for a year.
He's discipling you.
He's discipling me. I didn't know that's what he was doing.
They're so tricky that way.
Doggone Christians. So he discipled me, and this is the end of it. At the end of that year, I became a Christian.
Yeah.
Now, what that meant was I was going to have to break ties with my father. So I did. So I told my pops that I could no longer be in business with him. Business was really good. So
Always. Unfortunately.
That is a growth industry
Yes.
you were in there.
it's a growth industry. So I broke ties with my dad.
That's got to have been painful.
It was very painful. He subsequently told his friends that he had lost me to God. And I continued on. Right during that time, I accepted a call to ministry. I didn't know what it meant, but I started asking the preachers around the church, and then some preachers that I knew in the community, and even customers who were preachers. had a lot of customers who were preachers. A lot of customers.
This is real.
Yeah.
No, I know it is. I know it is. I know it is. I'm just,
Yeah.
I'm here.
So,
In there, Maggie.
but they tell me,
But you wonder why, like he was saying, like, you know, why his father said
I lost
Never
him to
trust
God.
preachers.
never trust preachers and Christians
Yeah.
because they're full of you know what. Well, he had plenty of evidence.
I love
Yeah,
a lot
I
of
know it.
evidence.
I know it.
So my pops loses me to God, and I'm on this path, not really knowing what it meant or where I was going, but it was interesting. Along the way, I told my pastor, Kirby John, that I accepted a call to ministry, and I really expected the skies to open up, and a big clap of thunder and great applause, and I told him, and I said, so man, I'm accepting a call to ministry. And I'll never forget it. He leaned back in his chair, and he said, so why would you want to do that? And those words kind of rang in my head for a while. And even though we talked about everything else for the next year, he never mentioned the call to ministry again. And at the end of that year, a year of silence, he asked me one day to preach the laity sermon. I think late Sunday was in October. Preached the laity sermon that Sunday. In that same period of time, a second campus came available to Windsor Village from the bishop in the Texas Conference. He gave me the keys to the building and asked if I would go and get the building cleaned up and start a ministry there that he would oversee. And I said it would be an honor. I did. We took the keys, got it cleaned up, started a 10 o'clock worship service. That was a satellite campus from Windsor Village. And he met with me. This is my seminary experience. Kirby John met with me every week for a year. And it was a breakfast meeting, and I would go to the meeting prepared. I'd tell him what had happened at the church the week before. These were the dilemmas. How would you resolve them? He would tell me how to resolve the dilemmas, what words to use with the church people that would bring them peace. And every time a person attempted to go around my leadership to him, he always pointed them back to me.
That's good.
Yeah. I think the most valuable thing he did for me was pointed every crisis back to me.
He established your authority.
Established my authority.
And trained, let you deal with reality and
On the job.
train. Yeah.
The next year, we met every month for a year. So from a week for a year, every month for a year. During those months, it was a different conversation because church was growing pretty rapidly. He was trusting what was happening. Only got in trouble 3 times, and those 3 times.
Only 3?
Only 3 times. and they always amounted to pissing off a constituent.
Always.
Always. And a constituent who knew how to complain effectively. So he even taught me how to handle, constituents who knew how to complain effectively. So along the way, the church just grew. Ultimately, he said, well, why don't you just take this and keep going? And I said no. So for the next 7 years, I left Pastor Caldwell's name on the bulletin as the senior pastor, and I left me and Juanita's name on the bulletin as associate pastors, even though we had been appointed senior pastors in the second year. And people would ask, why would you take the visible second seat when you wouldn't have to? And it was really more of an old street code that basically said you honor the person that break you. So in the 8th year, I put my name on the bulletin as the senior pastor.
Wow. And today, your church worships.
Oh, well, that number's changing.
Yeah.
We have worshipped 1,800, 2,000 people for a long time.
Okay.
And then when we stopped worshiping 1,800, 2,000 people, I didn't change the number. And I kind of woke up this year. I think 2017 was the hardest year I've ever experienced in my life.
Uh-huh.
But in that difficulty, I really determined that there are a lot of things that don't matter.
Yeah.
One of them was how many people are reported showing up.
Yeah.
So the number is now 1,200. And my district superintendent called me, and he said, "So, Rudy, looks like you went from 1,800 to 1,200 people over a year."
Yeah.
I said,
It looks that way, but that's just
well, I said, we can just view it as an accounting error. Because it was. You know, I counted for years, I counted everybody who showed up. Just everybody. So, and now I'm just counting the people who show up.
So if that's one of the things that doesn't really matter,
It doesn't really matter.
what are the things that really do matter?
Yeah, I've had a chance to really think about what matters. So this year, 2017, this past year, was a year we completed our last capital project. We built like $30 million in public housing.
Wow.
And all public money. And the one project, the last project that we built, just almost killed me. We ended up with a very unscrupulous contractor.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh man, who basically just knew the game and got us for $3 million extra that we didn't have. At the same time, our satellite campus was spiraling in terms of cost and the lack of return. At the same time, our revenue had declined as well. So just a trifecta of just three very unfortunate occurrences at the same time,
Yeah.
all amounting to a financial crisis. So in the midst of this financial crisis, of which I'm taking extremely personal, I mean like extremely personal, because my code is I don't disappoint the people who help me.
and you've got your identity as businessman.
Who gets it done?
Who gets it done? I mean, that's got to be deep. That's deeply rooted, man. So this is like the devil is he's pushing your buttons, man.
Deeply rooted.
Yeah.
So so here we go. I am in the midst of an economic catastrophe unfolding right before me, and I'm paralyzed. Everything that I attempt to do does nothing to impact the scenario. So the first thing that happened to shortstop this collapse was I stopped cashing my paycheck. Then my key leadership stopped cashing their paychecks. And it was strictly stopgap. It was a Band-Aid because the hole was huge.
Yeah.
So I've got and now I have a project that's been blacklisted by funding sources because of the leadership I put in place. That particular leader, great leader, good person, but not well received by the existing funding sources. So downtown revenue on the decline, expenses, Northwest Campus, expenses peaking, no hope in sight. The one of our biggest and last housing projects, $15 million, is right at that moment was on the brink of insolvency. So here I am in the midst of a moment that meant economic disaster. Economic disaster. And so the first thing that happens in the midst of this pending economic disaster is shame.
Yeah.
Takes over. And I'm thinking, man, I haven't tried to hurt anybody. I've actually only tried to help. And maybe my vision was too big. And from one moment to the next, it's I'm sinking, and we're getting closer to insolvency. And that was July. By August, there was no real hope in sight that we were going to make it. We were out at this point at about $8 million in debt. 4 of it was three and a half of it was the housing developments, and other part of it was the church. And with great relationships, with great relationships, people were extremely kind to me. But I wasn't kind to myself. So in August, I had one day. One really dark day. Then I thought, maybe if I died today, then maybe this would be okay. I made 3 phone calls. One to a good friend of mine who I know had a dark moment before I survived it. 2 to my wife, who spends at least an hour a day with God. And the 3rd was to my therapist, who knows me better than any human being alive. So I get to my therapist that day, and on the brink of absolute collapse. And she says, Rudy, you have been successfully running from failure your whole life. But she knows me.
Yeah.
And I have been. Like, I've always felt failure was right at my heels. I never had a down moment where I said, okay, this is okay. No. I've always felt it was like right there, about to catch me. So she said, how about a perspective change? She said, how about, she's a little Jewish lady, really, really, like, incredible. She said, Jesus, you're a Jesus guy.
Yep, you got that right. All right. Yeah, let's go with that.
I'm a Jesus guy. She said, why don't you run towards Jesus? Novel idea.
Yeah. It's so funny how we pastors don't think of that. Takes a Jewish lady to tell us,
That's right. And it did.
Yeah.
And she did. And man, I'm going to tell you, It was like she said it, and the light came on. And I said, okay, I'm going to try that. Mm-hmm. So I leave her office, and the next few days, I'm thinking, okay, run towards. Because it's taken a lot of energy to run from something. So I kept doing it. And this is the craziest thing. End of story. A little Baptist church approaches us about buying our North Campus. A storm approaches the Gulf named Harvey.
Mm-hmm.
Heard of it.
Yeah.
A little bit.
And drops more rain in Houston than Houston had ever seen. And then the decision that I'd already made to downsize my personal life. The campus sells. Harvey literally creates an opportunity for us to create a new narrative. And $1 million came through our doors in 90 days.
Wow.
And then in my own life, I made the decision to live simply. Mm. And I've never lived simply. So remember, I used to be in the sex trade. I go from there to building a big church. Uh-huh. I've never had a down moment. Yeah, I started simplifying my life. We moved out of a really big house into a really small house. And along with that, I started simplifying everything around my life. That therapist said, you know what, Rudy, you need to reevaluate who you call a friend. You need to go through your phone, all 3,600 contacts.
It's okay. Scott's hyperventilating over here. He's just like...
and determine who amongst
3,600
contacts.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
That's nuts. Yeah.
Who amongst that group would come and get you? Mm. You know?
Yeah.
And today, and then all of the bankers and funders and lenders, I've gone back over the last month, and I've apologized to all of those folks. And I told them, I say, I missed an opportunity. Hmm. And they've all very graciously have accepted my apologies. In many cases, they have restructured all of our debt. And now the challenge for me is to continue to live simply every day.
Amen.
That's my story.
Yeah.
That is a story. Mm-hmm. Wow. Thanks for sharing that with us.
So as laid back and contrarian or countercultural as I might appear, I've had to admit more than once that I am driven into maniacal ways. Mm-hmm. And you find people like me. I was telling y'all before we started the show that on this Myers-Briggs I'm an ENTJ, and I found out because I'm a mentor to a seminarian at another seminary,
which will remain nameless.
Which will remain nameless. And part of their process is to make sure the nuts who are mentoring their students. And they explained to this student just how unique I am as a human being. But
there's something just in the stories that you just told. There's something to me that's just connecting. Is this picture of you as a kid sitting in Maymay's mission circle, mm-hmm. where it's real, and you running away from failure all this time, and finally getting to and having all the trappings of, like, quote, success or whatever, mm-hmm. and getting back to something again, this kind of simplicity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just some arc of the Holy Spirit going on here that I just think is really beautiful, and something that that contemporary Protestantism in this country just so desperately needs.
It really does.
We really appreciate you sharing your insights with us, Pastor Rudy. Thank you.
It's good to be with you.
This has been a really great conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I know all the folks listening are going to benefit a lot from it.
Yeah.
Thanks for your honesty.
Yeah, thank you.
Rudy, would it be okay if I just prayed for you?
Yes, I totally.
I love
Good
that.
job, Scott.
I
Let's
need
go.
that. Yeah.
Father, I just want to pray for Pastor Rudy. God, I hear his story, and I hear just the way in which your Holy Spirit has worked in his life. Times when he's run from you and he's run to you, and
Right.
And what I know, God, is that you've used him in a lot of people's lives, sometimes in spite of himself.
That's right.
But you want to keep doing that,
Yeah.
and that you're taking this vulnerability, you're taking this submission, you're taking this simplicity, you're taking the insights that he's gained over just observation over the years of seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you want to take that and you want to continue to use that to bless people, to pour into
Yes.
people the way Curry John Caldwell poured into him.
Yeah.
And
That's
the way,
good.
So I just pray, God. I just pray for you to give him, not a vision, not an opportunity in that sense of something he has to be successful, but just a submission to pouring himself out into this next generations
Thank
of
you.
people who just need the encouragement that he got from somebody who took the time to pour into him. And I just pray this all in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen. Thank y'all.
So thank you for joining us at the Plain Truth Podcast again. And come back, come see us, and check out Rudy Rasmus's book and Touch. And follow his story and come back to us next time. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
See y'all.